I want to thank you for tuning in to another episode of TigerTube. And if you can't see us, if you're listening in, that means you're listening on Tiger Paw Radio. And thank you very much for listening in. I'm super excited today. One of the topics that's near and dear to my heart is the MSP world. And the guest that I have on today, Juan Fernandez, I'm going to let him introduce himself, but he's someone that I go back a long way with. We've actually done a few interviews together in different roles and different past lives. And super excited to hear about what you're doing now. So if you've been curious about how the MSP world is changing and what things are going to be looking like in the next few years, this is the interview for you. So without further ado, Juan, maybe you can introduce yourself for our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And welcome everybody to the show. It's a great honor to be here with Wes, joining you again, my friend. We have lived many lives in the MSP space, have we not? I mean, I went from a consultant, actually owning my own MSP to now, well, I should say as an MSP, going now to consulting, right? And so I was well known in the copier space for building an MSP, took it from 0 to about 20 million in about 6 years successfully, and then came out to start helping other MSPs figure out what are they missing, what is the strategy, process, procedures, and other things that they need to be focusing on. And I really enjoy this space. I love empowering others to be successful. I chose the title of Chief Encouragement Officer because I love to see people be successful. And one of the other passion projects is just co-authored a book, the MSP Owner's Handbook, which is also giving advice back to the channel and also to MSPs that are trying to figure out what should I be doing. So really happy to be here and happy to share anything that I can with the community today.
Well, I appreciate that. And, this interview was actually spawned in a conversation that we had the last time we saw each other at the CompTIA event. And you work with a ton of MSPs. Yeah. And certainly a lot is changing right now, right? So the one thing that really intrigued me, and maybe we can have a little chat about this right now, is with everything moving into the cloud. I mean, the cloud was a dirty word 5 years ago, right? But now it's everywhere. Everything is migrating to the cloud. So maybe you can, share with us, how is that, changing what MSPs maybe are going to need to do to grow in the next 5 years?
I've been talking about this for quite some time. I've seen this as a shift, whether I was, creating my own MSP or helping other MSPs, just really starting to look at what I call business operations as a service. I started early on, back when you were a flat rate, we were both speaking the same language, Wes. We're talking is everything as a service and how to synergize that, that monthly reoccurring revenue number with, tangible products and services. And now cloud has simplified that. It's given us that strategy, and we figured out this X as a service. And now we're talking customer experience as a service, and business operations as a service, I think, is the next place we go. And it's, cloud solutions is giving us this ability to create these new marketplaces of opportunity where, MSPs can now go and pick up these, already pre-canned sales and marketing strategies along with the technology that can empower their customers to really empower their remote workforce, right? And I talked about that in 2017. I said, one of the big things is going to be about increasing ROI, increasing productivity, and empowering a remote workforce, because that is the generation. Now, fast forward to today, I didn't know that was going to be there was going to be a pandemic in the middle of it, which was going to explode the whole MSP ecosystem and force us all into these remote work situations, right? So to your point, I think that it really, if anything that happened that was good, if there was any kind of a silver lining, which I cannot say that there really was there, but it caused us to evolve really quickly. It caused us to think about what our customers' needs really are. And that was, this remote work capability. And so we're seeing a new era of managed service provider that's coming into this space that doesn't have a lot of the old adages of physical hardware, right? And we, during the PC shortage during the beginning of the pandemic, and even still, product wasn't available, right? So we had to figure out, how do we go to market with what we got? And so it really created pressure points that created diamonds in the rough. And I think that's what you're starting to see now, is this new evolution of managed services that doesn't look anything the same as it did 2 years ago. And so it's changing the way we become more consultative. It's becoming more customer focused. It's becoming more outcome based and delivery driven around customer success than it was ever before. Before it was okay, I need to sell you this to keep you in business. Now it's how do I change your business? So cloud is really is empowered us to become something we never thought we could, right? And you said it was a bad word before. It was like, oh well, I love taking care of servers. Like I make all my money on that. Why would I do that? And now it's like I can't get away from that server fast enough to get them to the cloud. It's like, wait, there's so much less friction here, and I can like the customer's so much more happy and flexible, and it empowers them to scale their businesses. And now this new lens is, it's like we got new clarity with these lenses we got put on now of this future that is in front of us. So I'm excited about it, and I see it as a force multiplier and all these new MSPs that are standing up these days.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned a couple of things there that I'm really passionate about right now. And one is the CX, so the customer experience, right? Then we start looking at how we add value. And I think it's always been about that. It's just sometimes we've forgotten about it, right? When we were talking about speeds and feeds or how beautiful our devices were, sometimes we got a little carried away. But I think it's always been about the customer experience, right? And the second thing you mentioned there is now that we've been, kind of forced into this accelerated growth and change patterns, because of the pandemic, that we're starting to realize just how much tech debt we have, right? And it's not, a lot of people think of tech debt and they think of it as being their own systems, right? Like, here's how we do things. And in order to be better for our customers, we got to, start shedding or figuring out how we get rid of some of this tech debt. But it's also in the offerings, right? That there's a lot of tech debt in the offerings. So it's fascinating. And I like that, the fact that you talk about this enablement idea, right? That, it's actually opened up so many more, new opportunities. One of the things that I talk with people a lot, because I do work through different channels, much like you do, right? Is talking about definitions. And I'm actually going to be writing a blog about this because, we love to put ourselves in buckets, right? So we've had, the MSP, we've had managed IT providers. Now, of course, with the focus on security, we have MSSPs, right? And then we have value-added resellers. And I wonder sometimes, what's the difference anymore, right? Are these lines starting to blur for what they actually, are? Are we starting to lose, some of the differences in these definitions? What's going on there?
You'd be surprised, right? So like I sit also as the chair, co-chair for the channel development advisor for CompTIA. And, there's so many amazing thought leaders in that group that it's often interesting to drop that oil in that water and see what happens, right? Because, one of the challenges I see that vendors have these days is not understanding what their ideal client profile is. And that's because there's so many variations of MSP, right? I started, back when a couple of years ago, I started kind of, just charting this out, thinking around this nuance of why does everyone struggle with this so much? And it's like, we talk about MSP 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. And I realized that's not really a thing. It's actually just something we said just to kind of define the era that we're in, but it really isn't relative in regards to like the full rainbow effect of MSPs that are there. I've started looking at it a different way where there's MSPs that are in practice, or MSPs that have a practice, or MSPs that are in best practice, right? And so if you can look at it from those three lenses, I've also quantified it as such that there are actually 7 different MSP types, and it's actually growing, because if we talk about the MRR type companies that are not truly MSPs, that are just resellers that call themselves MSPs, we almost have 10 flavors of MSP, all in the same word, right? And so I've been wondering why this hasn't been fully expanded upon to really identify like ICP, because, channel vendors often struggle to find market share with these types of companies because they're aiming at this market, but it's only penetrating 1% because it's really not resonating with the ones that are not truly an MSP, or maybe they have a connotation of MSSP. So, and it also, flip side of the coin is MSPs struggle with vendors because they don't understand how to go to market with them, right? I like your product, I want to do business with you, but like, well, I'm focused on MSP, MSSP, vendor, or bar, or ISV, not MSP SMB, right? So it's just interesting to watch how confused we still are and how misaligned, as close as we are as a community and dependent on each other, we're so far apart. And it's just really interesting to watch. And I think that, to your point, I'm really excited to read your blog and dive into what your thoughts are around that, because I believe that there's so many different versions of MSP now that it's just it's kind of weird to realize that there's that much difference.
and there is, right? And that's the problem for customers, is trying to figure out what that actually means.
Yeah.
I've actually had this, conversation in the managed print world as well, because when you use the term managed print provider, right? It's like, well, hold on, how exactly are you managing it? Like, are you just doing page and including service, or are you doing user management where you're applying rules and security levels? And there's all these different, complexities with the language that we use, right? And maybe that is the problem of English as a language. I know that when you look at Latin, there's 6 different words for love. There's probably more than that, right? Agape, amore, like there's all these different, subtleties, and we don't have that in our language. So maybe that's part of the problem. And do you think that it is blurring? Do you think that MSPs have to become more for their customers, or is hyper specialization more what's happening?
I really think that it's, here's the thing, right? And I talk about this often. It's like, you have to just pick, and I tell a lot of MSPs this, they're like, Juan, like, just give me a magic wand. And I'm like, the magic wand is your process should equal success. And then you should sell your process as the product, right? So like, again, if that's indicating that they need to be hyper specialized, I say this all the time, don't be a jack of all trades, but be a master of some. I think that you have to be good at something. You have to be delivering some sort of unique value, some sort of customer success. And then there should be an experience at the end of that. Can you go through your process and find success in your process with that customer? And can you do it repeatedly? Right. So I think that, to your point, I think there will become some sort of specialty in regards to what you deliver. And it could be anything. It could be security. You could pick managed services. You could pick hardware. You could pick anything. It doesn't really matter, but what it is you do should be your product. So I think it's specialized around the business process more than it is the technology or the service delivery components of what it is they're trying to deliver. So I think, again, back to your CX, every time I think about it, it's like, all I think about is wanting a customer to be successful more than I want them to do anything else. Right. So what does that mean to them? And then my product should do that for them.
I love it. And it actually echoes some comments that I heard from Tammy Beach in the HP interview that I did. Mm-hmm. She said, even as a printer company, that they've started looking away from the device and kind of raise their eyes up a little bit to look at the person and the process, because you can fill, as long as you know what success looks like you say, you can fill that in with your product offerings, and maybe it exposes some gaps. Maybe it exposes some areas that we've got to grow. Right. I love it. This thing that remote work, you touched on it a little bit earlier, and I want to dive into this a little more. Right. And, there are some companies in the world that are, and very few of them, that are forcing all of their employees back to, the office or the auto manufacturing facility, as it were. I won't name names, but
yeah, we won't say anything there.
Yeah, because he's probably listening on me right now. But most organizations, I think, have come to terms with the fact that this idea of either remote work or mobile work, or some hybrid version of it is here to stay, right? And I think we can agree at least that it's not going anywhere. Whatever it ends up looking like in the next 2 years is anyone's guess, but it's not going away. So are there opportunities and challenges that MSPs have, with this whole new remote work paradigm that didn't exist before?
Yeah, I think that, everyone, it just depends on what school of thought you're in, right? Again, back if you're in that in practice phase of, being an MSP, it's going to hurt a little bit more, but it's also giving you more opportunity to springboard those that maybe already have a practice and jump across that to best practice, right? So one of the challenges I think that MSPs have always struggled with is, the cost conversation on top of security, right? We've enabled people to steer away from it because, well, it'll never happen to me, as they may say. During the pandemic, we increased our threat landscape 1,000-fold, right? Because now all of a sudden the command and control went away, and now all of a sudden we have all these bring your own devices and these homes that are now connecting to corporate infrastructures with God knows what on it, right? So it's like, all the kids that are messing around on the computers that are completely malware ridden, are now tapping into corporate infrastructure because there was no hardware. So it was a pretty significant opportunity for us to say, look, we need to think past this to harden our security lives, if you will, and now be thinking more meaningfully of like, look, here's what this means to you as a business. And they were listening, right? So the seat at the table became a little bit more pulled in. Like we weren't just a random family member that just dropped in for Thanksgiving. We're now an actual family member that's here at the table that brought rolls and some food, and it's good. And now I want to have you here because I need you here, right? So for those that took that seat, found that it was probably a lot easier to have the best practice conversation and jump past the cost conversation. It's like, look, this is what you need to run your business. And I don't think that's going to change. So here's that silver lining I talked about, was that everyone's ears opened during the pandemic on what they needed to do. It's like, okay, I'm in uncharted territory here. How do I keep this boat afloat? And it's like, you need security. And I think that now they were listening, and it's fine. Now we can implement best practice and security process and protocols. That's going to take you from where you were way faster. And it's going to give you that autonomy to allow people to work remotely. So for me, I think that the remote work is going to stick around. For those businesses that are pushing back, I totally get it. They have a lot of tech debt. They got a lot of infrastructure they need to run back to. It's too expensive to empower them to be remote workers. And again, manufacturing and certain other trades can't really effectively work remotely, I would say, because there is, things that have to happen in a physical location to generate product. But I will say I've been talking about this generational divide for quite some time, and the upcoming generation doesn't want to work in an office, right? So, I mean, regardless of whether or not us old hats want to go drive to an office and put in an 8 to 5, like it just isn't going to be that for them, right? And they want work-life balance, and they want to be able to be flexible. I'm going to Yellowstone next week, and I can tell you, I'll be working via my satellite internet from unsaid company, but I'll be working, right? And I think that we're all starting to recognize that we can do this if we just do it right.
Yeah. So like Juan, I've been working remotely now for over 20 years, right? And the viewers won't see this, but we just actually had one of those live remote moments where my daughter's lunch was showing up and the dogs were going crazy. And it does have certain sacrifices, but certainly the one thing that I can say from experience that it almost hurts to hear from some people is they say, well, you can't do remote work because you're not as productive, right? And I certainly say that, like, to your point, there are certain areas where you can't work, but for us knowledge workers, with the tools and stuff that are available to us, that leap ahead that we've all done with technology to be able to do like an interview like we're doing right now, 100%. Right? It's certainly changed. So, appreciate that. And I also think, I'm not sure if you've heard this term, but it's called meeting equity. And it's this concept that because we're all doing meetings in different ways now in different places, that everyone should have the same experience, right? With meetings. So if you're at the office, which has a really expensive kind of, setup in the boardroom, versus those that are working at home, that meeting experience should be the same. And I gotta think that there's some kind of opportunity for MSPs and others to be able to help deliver on that in the future.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, it's it's that remote office in a box, right? So, all the products and services all managed, you're, a full employee rollout. Like you see it featured all over social media, like when companies are sending them these, amazing boxes of, I just got hired and look at all this stuff. I got a camera and a laptop and I got mics and all this stuff and lighting. And it's really fun and to set up, because it's like, I don't want to leave this, because this is now, it gives me freedom, right? I have it all set up here. You can't see it all, but for me, I'm the same way. I've always been like that. I carry it in my bag so that I carry my camera of preference and my mic of choice with me, right? So I'll be doing a webinar on Wednesday night at 7:00 p.m. out of a hotel, and no one will know the difference, right? So it's just one of those things where I love where you're going with it. And you're right. There is a lot of opportunity for managed services to empower the remote worker. There's so many softwares and security products and, management and monitoring tools that can be added on, and professional services, which is the icing on the cake for most of us, to really, deliver that. And I like where you're going with it, because there is a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah. One of the analogies that really inspired me the first time I heard it, and continues to, is that, pine cones, right? That the only way that they can actually deliver their seeds is if they experience a forest fire, right? That that some of these ways that we grow and some of these opportunities only come about because of, some pretty hard circumstances, right?
Well, and I love where you're going with that, because for me, Wes, I didn't know that pine cones open and shrunk all the time. Like,
Right.
I didn't know that until I moved to Colorado, and I was like, man, these pine cones are like all the time. And then we'd throw them in the truck and then they'd open up, and then I'd get back home and they were closed. And I was like,
What's going on?
what's going on here? And so it was really interesting when we brought them to Texas, like these little tiny pine cones were like massive pine cones out of nowhere. And if anyone's ever done that, it's a good experiment with your kids. So just know that we had a blast with the heating and cooling of the pine cones.
Right? Isn't it fascinating?
It
Yeah.
is. And then it's interesting to tie back to a personal analogy, because sometimes you need heat to kind of, create some new evolution of yourself. And I think that's what the pandemic did. And so I just hope no one, cools off on that. Keep the gas down.
Exactly. Let's keep moving into the future, right? Hey, and one of the things that we're seeing now, I'm not really sure if it's due to the pandemic, maybe partially, but there's an acquisition frenzy going on, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I first saw it in the Office Equipment channel, where we started seeing like a lot of the larger mega dealers starting to gobble them up, and you've seen how Marco's grown and Gordon
Mhm.
Flesh and others, right? But it's happening in the MSP space as well, right? It seems to be rampant. So maybe you can share with us like what you see for what kinds of companies are selling and what kind of companies are buying, like what's going
Yeah.
on.
It's really interesting, right? And we'll be covering some of this at Channel Futures. For those of you guys that are joining the MSP Summit that's coming up at September 13th through 15th, I encourage you. There will be doing an M&A session, to be a couple of them, and it's really a hot topic at every event and in the space. And I think that what we're seeing, Wes, is, I mean, if you remember a few years back, we said that there was going to be a 35% decrease in technical staff available because of the ageism, right? There's going to be people aging out. Well, there's a lot of us, me, myself included, that aren't getting any younger, right? So as we own businesses and have built profitable businesses, there's this new go-to-market strategy that maybe some aren't ready for, right? They're like, oh, well, that's a product or service that I'm not apt to sell, and maybe I'm not going to be competitive in that space, or maybe I'm just at a point in my life where I'm ready to go, or I really like this remote thing, but I don't want to take a phone call anymore. I'm kind of done with it. So I mean, it's just the amount of entrepreneurs that we had in tech that built IT companies or businesses are looking to exit. And from that's created a lot of opportunity. And of course, with everything happening, a lot of businesses, may not have performed well, which created a lot of opportunity for additional add-ons for the space. So like those businesses that have invested a lot in this new go forward momentum, or they're looking for new businesses. It was kind of it was a seller's market, but it was also a buyer's market, because even though the sellers were selling, they were getting more than they were going to get before, but the buyers were buying at a value because it was better than the market was performing. So it was like, I can buy that for less than and make more money on that than I could by putting my money in traditional investments. So that's why all these funds were created. And it's still the case, right? It's still not slowing down. Now it's just amplified even more, because now it's made the MSP more aware that there's money out there that can be had. And it's like, I hear it all the time with a lot of MSPs. They're like, Juan, I just need to get my ARR up, and I need to clean up my books, and I'm out of here. Like, I'm done. Like, I've had a lifestyle business for the last 18 years, and I need 6 months to get this thing cleaned up, and I'm going to sell my business on the open market. And I'm like, good for you. You've built a great business. You should have a legacy and enjoy all the money and efforts you put into it. So, and on the flip side of the coin, there's a lot of companies that are like, hey, I'm looking for companies that are in XYZ space. I'm looking for this level of EBITDA, because they know that when they add them in, that they're going to, click them up another 10 or 12%. And they know for a fact, with everything they already have on their back end, that this Net Plus acquisition is going to be huge for them. So it's really interesting to watch how both need each other and are both feeding each other. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me when you think about it, like how the market has come to kind of a perfect storm, if you will, for those that are aging out of the marketplace. And yet those customers are still so valuable, right? That, for somebody looking to grow, getting that customer base is absolutely, it's a good buy.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of them. It's interesting because I'm even watching certain companies buy out, like even copier dealers. They're they're more interested like, hey, I'll buy your copier dealer, and then I'm gonna split off the managed services, and I'm gonna sell that off.
Right.
It'll pay for the copier dealer. And it's like, wow, what a trick. And it's like, I would have never thought about that move, but I saw it done recently, and I was like, hey, and
Wow.
the crazy part about where it's at, when you can take, it's so interesting how you can take and put these things together and grow your business. So it's an interesting time.
It certainly is. And it's probably a good segue into the last question that I have for you today, right? And for those MSPs that are looking to stay in the marketplace, that are looking to grow, it's time for the impossible question. If you had one piece of advice for those folks, what would that be?
I think this is my favorite question of all. And I will say this from the purest, deepest part of my heart. It's build a profit protection plan. So many business owners have gone through life not built for profit, and just staying just above the needle, just above, just to keep it going. And if you are looking to exit your business, you want to make sure that this thing is fully optimized. So your strategy, your process, your programming, all of that should be aimed at profit. So if you're not making profit, you need to go back to the drawing board and figure out how you need to do that, because you're never going to get what you're worth if you don't make money, right? And so for anyone that's starting a business, focus on that. For anybody that's in business, focus on that. For anybody that's looking at buying one, focus on the ones that are profitable, right? You're going to get some great values for those that are buying and the ones that aren't making any money, but there's also some skeletons in the closet there. And I think a lot of them that are buying know that. And so, it's interesting, like M&A will only look at a certain amount of EBITDA now. Like there's certain companies, they don't even look under a certain amount of EBITDA because they know that there's problems down below. And so to get yourself ready, again, you have to be making money. So I built mine that way. I built all the things that I do that way. And I think that for my best piece of advice is profit protection program.
Well, that's great. I think it's wonderful advice. And listen, maybe you could share for our audience your new book and where they can
Oh,
get.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we just launched a new book.
Let's have a look.
And I will share this one with you because this one's near and dear to my heart. We just launched the MSP Owner's Handbook QBR edition. So for those that are interested in picking this up, it's all about strategy, process, and procedure on how to enact change in the QBR process. So for those of you who are looking, pick it up on Amazon. You guys can go and find it there. And the best part about this book is 50% of the money from the book goes back into a fund that is eligible for MSPs or people trying to get into tech. We're going to be issuing certifications and education and give back for those that apply openly. So if we're going to have it's a contest. You write a little story, tell us how you think it'll change you, and then we'll be issuing that back. So it's a give back book, and anybody that's participating in it, we have a lot of great people that have come together on sponsoring that and allowing us to talk about it. And it's really great and it's really fun. And I'm excited to be able to give back, because I was once one of those young people in tech trying to figure out how to get into this space. And I remember going to buy a first certification and then failing at it and having to figure out how to pay for it again. And I'm like, holy crap. Like I have to go tell my wife, girlfriend at the time, that I didn't make it and I got to come up with another $150. Like that'll true you up pretty quick.
Yeah.
And especially when you make $150 a week, right? So it was like, okay, well, we're eating air. It's a real big give back for me, and I'm really happy to do it. Marnie Stockman and I came together on this book, and this is just one of 6. So this is the first of 6 that's coming out as a series, and then I really look forward to helping help people out on this. So thanks for asking about that, Wes.
Yeah, well, it's really important. And I love this idea of giving back, right? That you found a way to actually use your knowledge and your expertise to give back. And that's something that's near and dear to my heart. So really appreciate all you're doing there. And I really appreciate you taking the time to do the interview today. And in respect for your time and for that of our audience, I just want to thank you for doing this today. And for everyone out there in Tiger Pod land that's either watching us on TigerTube or on Tiger Pod Radio, thanks again for your time. We know it's valuable, and we know that you've got some great learning content out of this today. And until next time, keep learning.